Lieutenant Colonel Rebecca Torres had perfected the art of invisibility. At 34, she moved through the crowded barracks of Camp Riverside with the quiet efficiency of someone who had learned long ago that sometimes the best way to observe was to become utterly unremarkable. Her auburn hair, when not pulled back in regulation style, fell in gentle waves that caught the morning light filtering through the narrow windows. But today, like every day for the past 6 weeks, it was secured in a precise bun that revealed nothing of the woman beneath the uniform. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The other recruits at Camp Riverside saw exactly what she wanted them to see. Private Jessica Morgan, 26 years old, college dropout, struggling to keep up with the physical demands of basic training. She had crafted this persona carefully, studying the files of real recruits who had washed out in previous cycles, borrowing their mannerisms, their hesitations, their small rebellions against authority. The backstory was simple but believable. A woman from rural Montana who had joined the army as a last resort after a series of failed jobs and a relationship gone wrong. Sergeant Kelvin Rourke saw her as something else entirely. To him, she was weakness wearing camouflage. Rourke was the kind of man who thrived on control, broad-shouldered, red-faced, with a voice that seemed permanently set to shouting. He had built his reputation on breaking recruits fast and hard. Complaints followed him everywhere, but so did results, and that was all his superiors cared about. As long as graduation numbers stayed high, no one looked too closely at his methods. From the moment Rebecca, Private Morgan, stumbled during her first obstacle course, Rourke mocked her. "You," he barked one morning, boots echoing across the concrete floor. "What's your problem, Morgan? Boots too heavy, or is it the brain?" Laughter rippled through the platoon. Rebecca kept her eyes forward, shoulders squared, breathing slow. She had heard worse in rooms far more dangerous than this. Still, she let her hands tremble just slightly, enough to sell the role. "I asked you a question," Rourke shouted, stepping into her space. "No, Sergeant," she replied softly. That softness became his fuel. Over the following days, she was singled out relentlessly. Extra push-ups, extra laps, public callouts during inspection. Rourke never touched her. He was careful about that, but his words cut with precision. Each insult was designed to strip away dignity, to invite others to join in, and they did, some out of fear, some out of boredom, a few because cruelty, when sanctioned, becomes entertainment. Rebecca noted everything. The times, the witnesses, the way Rourke's eyes flicked toward the laughing recruits, feeding on their approval. Then came the afternoon that crossed a line even he wouldn't be able to step back from. It started as a joke. The platoon had just finished a grueling field exercise when Rourke stopped them outside the barracks. His gaze locked onto Rebecca, and a slow smile crept across his face. "Morgan," he said casually, "you ever hear the saying, 'hair holds weakness'?" A few recruits snickered. "No, Sergeant," she answered. "Well," Rourke continued, pacing, "since you're having such a hard time adjusting, I figure we help you out. Strip away distractions, build character." He gestured toward the door. Inside, now, the room went quiet. Inside the barracks, under buzzing fluorescent lights, Rourke ordered the others to form a semicircle. Someone brought out the clippers, standard issue, usually reserved for medical checks or lice outbreaks. Rebecca's pulse quickened, but her face remained calm. This was not part of the original timeline, but it was well within acceptable parameters. "Sit," Rourke commanded. She sat. The clippers roared to life. As the first pass sheared through her carefully maintained bun, strands of auburn hair fell to the floor. Laughter erupted, sharp, uncomfortable, nervous laughter. Rourke laughed loudest of all. "Look at that," he said. Already lighter, clumps of hair followed, hitting the tile like fallen leaves. Rebecca stared straight ahead, jaw tight, eyes burning, not with humiliation, but with resolve. Each second etched itself into memory. Each face watching, each sound. When it was over, Rourke stepped back, admiring his work. "Stand up," he ordered. She did. The room fell silent. Her head was shaved clean, scalp pale under the harsh lights. Tears streaked her cheeks, not from weakness, but because even steel sometimes leaks when pressure builds. Rourke mistook them for victory. Dismissed. He said smugly, "Let that be a lesson." What Rourke didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the moment the clippers touched her head, a silent chain reaction had begun. A call had already been logged, a timestamp recorded, a vehicle rerouted. And somewhere beyond Camp Riverside's gates, a general was on his waif, furious, unstoppable, and very aware that the woman they had just humiliated outranked every single person in that room. The barracks were quieter than usual that night. Not peaceful, just restrained, the way a room gets when everyone knows something has gone wrong, but no one wants to be the first to say it out loud. Rebecca lay on her narrow bunk, hands folded behind her shaved head, staring at the underside of the top mattress above her. The cold air against her scalp felt foreign, almost intrusive, but she welcomed it. It reminded her to stay present. Around her, whispers traveled like contraband. "Did you see her face? Rourke went too far." She didn't even flinch. Rebecca heard it all. She always did. She replayed the afternoon in her mind, not emotionally, but tactically. Sergeant Rourke's tone, the witnesses in the room, the exact second the clippers made first contact, the recruit near the door who looked away in disgust, the one who laughed a little too loudly, then stopped when the hair hit the floor. Most importantly, the clock. Exactly 46 minutes had passed since the incident report, encrypted, pre-drafted weeks ago, had been automatically transmitted the moment her biometric monitor detected stress levels beyond the acceptable threshold for basic training. The Army loved data. Tonight, data would speak louder than any rank insignia. Across the compound, Sergeant Rourke was celebrating. He sat in the staff break room, boots kicked up on a chair, laughing with two junior NCO who clearly didn't find the joke as funny as he did. Still, they laughed when he laughed. Survival reflex. You should have seen her, Rourke said, mimicking a trembling voice. No, Sergeant. He snorted. Thought she was special. Turns out, same as the rest. One of the NCO shifted uncomfortably. Sarge, shaving her head like that. Was that authorized? Rourke waved him off. I'm authorized. I make soldiers. If they can't handle a haircut, they don't belong here. He missed the subtle detail, the way the hallway outside had gone unnaturally still. No boots running, no shouted orders, just silence pressing in, heavy and deliberate. Back in the barracks, light, Sout had been called. Rebecca rose quietly, slipping on her boots with practiced ease. She caught her reflection in the small metal mirror by the sinks. The shaved head changed her face, hardened it. For a moment, she allowed herself to see Rebecca Torres again. Not Private Morgan, Lieutenant Colonel Torres. The woman who had commanded units in places where mistakes were measured in body bags. The officer who had been sent here under classified authority to evaluate abuse patterns in training environments that had generated too many unexplainable dropouts. She straightened, then the alarm sounded, not the shrill chaos of a drill. This was different, short, sharp, unmistakably real. Red lights flashed along the corridor. Doors slammed open as recruits poured out, confusion written across their faces. What's happening? Is this an exercise? Rebecca stepped into formation without hesitation. Moments later, headlights cut through the windows. Too many, too coordinated. Black SUV rolled through the gates like a judgment convoy. MP spilled out first, weapons low but ready, then command staff, then, finally, a tall figure in dress uniform stepped into view. Even from a distance, the presence was unmistakable. General Marcus Hale. 3-star, combat legend, a man whose voice had ended careers and started wars, bureaucratic and otherwise. Rourke exited the admin building just as the general entered the courtyard. The color drained from his face. "General, sir," Rourke barked, snapping to attention so fast his heels scraped concrete. Hale didn't return the salute. His eyes moved past Rourke, scanning the assembled recruits. They stopped on Rebecca. On her shaved head, on the tear tracks still faintly visible on her cheeks, something in Hale's expression changed. Not anger yet, recognition. He turned back to Rourke slowly, deliberately. "Sergeant," Hale said, his voice calm in a way that made it terrifying. "Care to explain why a lieutenant colonel under my direct authority was publicly assaulted under your supervision?" The courtyard froze. Rourke blinked once, twice. "Sir, there must be a misunderstanding." Hale stepped closer. "You shaved her head," he continued, volume rising now, the sound carrying across the entire base, "for your amusement, without authorization, without cause, and without bothering to check who you were really messing with." MP moved in behind Rourke. Rebecca stepped forward. "Lieutenant Colonel Rebecca Torres," she said clearly. "Reporting as ordered, sir." Hale finally smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "At ease, Colonel," he replied. Then, louder for everyone to hear, "And someone get this sergeant some handcuffs." Metal clicked shut. Rourke's world collapsed in a single sound, and this was only the beginning. Sergeant Rourke didn't resist when the MP took his arms. At first, it looked like shock, his mouth slightly open, eyes darting from the handcuffs to the general's face, as if waiting for someone to laugh and call it a drill. But no one laughed. Not a single sound came from the formation of recruits standing rigid in the courtyard. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. General Hale turned slowly, taking in the scene with a commander's precision. The shaved, headed woman standing straight despite exhaustion. The recruits whose faces told a dozen different stories: fear, guilt, awe, regret. The sergeant who had just realized that authority, when abused, becomes a weapon that cuts its wielder first. "Lock the base down," Hale ordered calmly. "No one leaves, no one moves without clearance." "Yes, sir," came a chorus of voices. Rourke finally found his voice. "Sir, this is insane. I was conducting corrective training. She's a private." Hale raised a hand, silencing him mid-sentence. "She is a lieutenant colonel," Hale said, his tone deadly even. "And even if she weren't, what you did would still be indefensible." He turned toward Rebecca. "Colonel Torres, walk with me." They moved away from the formation, boots striking concrete in perfect rhythm. For a few steps, neither spoke. Then Hale exhaled slowly. "I told them you'd see some ugliness," he said. "I didn't expect this level of stupidity so quickly." Rebecca nodded once. "Neither did I, sir, but it's consistent with the patterns we've been tracking." Inside the admin building, the air felt different, cooler, quieter, stripped of bravado. Staff officers stood frozen as Hale passed, snapping to attention too late, eyes wide. Rourke was escorted into a side room, his protests growing quieter as the door closed behind him. Hale gestured for Rebecca to sit. She remained standing, at ease. He repeated gently this time. She sat. "Start from the beginning," Hale said. "Everything." Rebecca spoke plainly, without embellishment. The targeted harassment, the escalation, the laughter, the clippers, the witnesses. She recited names, times, locations. Hale listened without interruption, his jaw tightening with each detail. When she finished, the room was silent. This wasn't about discipline, Hale finally said. This was about humiliation. "Yes, sir." And it wasn't just him, was it? "No, sir." He created an environment where cruelty was rewarded. Others followed because they thought it was safe to do so. Hale leaned back, steepling his fingers. You got what you needed. Rebecca paused. I confirmed the problem, but this is bigger than Rourke. Hale smiled grimly. It always is. Outside, the base buzzed with restrained chaos. Investigators arrived. Phones were confiscated, training schedules were suspended indefinitely, recruits were separated, interviewed one by one. Some cried, some denied everything, a few told the truth in shaking voices, relieved to finally be allowed to speak. Word spread fast, a general, handcuffs, a shaved head that wasn't a punishment, but a line crossed. By morning, Camp Riverside was unrecognizable. Rourke sat alone in a holding room, uniform wrinkled, confidence gone. He replayed the moment again and again, the clippers, the laughter, the tears. How had he missed it? The posture, the calm, the way she never broke. He realized too late that strength doesn't always announce itself. In the briefing room, Hale addressed the senior staff. His voice carried authority sharpened by disappointment. This base will undergo a full command review, he said. Every training practice, every complaint buried, every incident brushed aside. If you enabled this behavior, if you ignored it, you will answer for it. Eyes dropped, pens stopped moving. Rebecca stood at the side of the room, hands clasped behind her back. For the first time since arriving at Camp Riverside, she was herself again, not invisible, not pretending. After the meeting, Hale stopped her in the hallway. You held the line, he said quietly. Not everyone could. She met his gaze. With respect, sir, this wasn't about me. It's about the next one, and the one after that. Hale nodded. That's why we sent you. As she walked back toward the barracks, soon to be reassigned, restructured, reborn, recruits stepped aside instinctively. No laughter now, no whispers, just understanding. They hadn't shaved her head to break her. They'd exposed themselves instead, and Camp Riverside would never forget the day a woman they thought was weak turned out to outrank them all. By sunrise, Camp Riverside no longer belonged to the men who had ruled it through fear. The flag still rose on schedule, snapping sharply in the morning wind, but everything beneath it had changed. Patrol routes were doubled. Offices, once loud with casual authority, were silent. Doors that had never been closed were now firmly shut, guarded by MP with unreadable expressions. Lieutenant Colonel Rebecca Torres stood alone on the parade ground, the chill biting against her freshly shorn scalp. For the first time since arriving, she wore her real rank openly. The silver oak leaf on her collar caught the light, unmistakable now, impossible to ignore. Across the field, recruits gathered in formation. Every platoon, every drill instructor, every officer assigned to the base. They stood straighter than ever before, not because they were ordered to, but because they were afraid not to. General Hale stepped forward. What followed was not a speech, it was an indictment. Camp Riverside. Hale began, his voice carrying without effort, exists to train soldiers, not to destroy them. He paced slowly, letting each word settle. Discipline is not humiliation, strength is not cruelty, and real leadership does not require fear to function. His eyes swept the formation. Over the last 18 months, this base has produced impressive graduation numbers. He continued. It has also produced an alarming number of medical discharges, psychological withdrawals, and unexplained resignations. A murmur rippled through the ranks, quickly silenced. Those numbers were ignored, Hale said, buried, justified, excused, until last night. He turned slightly, gesturing toward Rebecca. Lieutenant Colonel Torres was placed here under direct authorization to observe, evaluate, and report. Some of you treated her as entertainment, others looked away, a few spoke up quietly, and you will be remembered. Hale's voice hardened. Sergeant Calvin Rourke is currently in military custody, pending charges including assault, abuse of authority, and conduct unbecoming. That investigation will not stop with him. The words hit like a shockwave. Several instructors went pale, one swallowed hard, another stared straight ahead, jaw clenched, knowing exactly which memories were resurfacing. Hale continued. Effective immediately, the entire command structure of Camp Riverside is suspended. Interim leadership will be appointed within the hour. All training operations are halted pending review. He paused. Let me be very clear, he said, raising his voice for the first time. This is not about one shaved head. This is about a culture that mistook obedience for respect and silence for consent. He turned back to Rebecca. Colonel Torres, she stepped forward. You were asked to endure. Hale said, loud enough for everyone to hear. You did more than that. You exposed the rot. Rebecca held his gaze. With respect, sir, the rot exposed itself. A few recruits exchanged glances. For the first time, some of them smiled, not in mockery, but in relief. Later that day, the interviews intensified, doors closed, recorders clicked on. Files were opened that had not been touched in years. Patterns emerge, always the same names, the same methods, the same excuses, jokes framed as motivation, punishments disguised as tradition, complaints dismissed as weakness. By evening, 3 more instructors had been relieved of duty. One tried to resign on the spot. The resignation was denied. In a quiet office overlooking the parade ground, Rebecca sat across from General Hale once more. The tension of the last 24 hours had finally begun to settle, leaving behind something heavier. You know, Hale said, rubbing his temple, some people are going to say this was extreme. Rebecca nodded. They always do. They'll say basic training isn't supposed to be comfortable. It's not, she replied evenly. But it's supposed to be lawful. Hale studied her. Would you do it again? Rebecca didn't hesitate. Yes, sir, without changing a thing. Hale exhaled slowly, then smiled, this time with genuine respect. I figured you'd say that. Outside, as dusk fell, recruits were dismissed early. No shouting, no punishment runs, just quiet instructions and something unfamiliar in the air. Safety. As Rebecca walked back toward the barracks one last time, a young recruit stepped out of line. Her hands shook. Ma'am, she said softly. Rebecca stopped. Thank you. The recruit whispered, for not looking away. Rebecca nodded once. Don't thank me. Remember what you saw, and don't become it. That night, Camp Riverside slept differently. Not because fear had vanished, but because for the first time, accountability had arrived, and tomorrow, the consequences would become permanent. The official transfer orders came at dawn. Lieutenant Colonel Rebecca Torres stood at the edge of the parade ground as a staff runner handed her the sealed envelope. She didn't need to open it to know what it said. Missions like this never ended with applause, only movement. Fix what's broken. Document the truth. Move on before familiarity dulled the edge. Camp Riverside was quiet behind her. Not the uneasy quiet of fear, but something steadier. Controlled, watched. The base looked the same on the surface. Same buildings, same flags, same training lanes. But the people were different. Shoulders no longer hunched when authority approached. Eyes met instructors' gazes instead of dropping instinctively to the ground. Power, when exposed, loses its illusion. General Hale joined her, hands clasped behind his back. They're restructuring the entire training doctrine here. He said, outside oversight, rotational leadership, mandatory reporting channels that don't disappear into filing cabinets. Rebecca nodded. Good. And Rourke, Hale continued. She didn't ask. She already knew. Court-martial, Hale said, multiple counts, witnesses lined up faster than anyone expected. Turns out, once silence breaks, it doesn't stop. Rebecca looked out across the field where recruits were beginning morning formation. Calm, orderly, respectful. Fear thrives in isolation, she said. All it takes is one moment of truth to collapse it. Hale studied her for a moment. You paid a price. She touched her shaved head lightly. Stubble had already begun to grow in, rough beneath her fingers. This, she said, hair grows back. Hale nodded, accepting the answer for what it was, and what it wasn't. As she turned to leave, the recruits snapped to attention, not because they were ordered to, but because they chose to. No laughter, no whispers, just recognition. One by one, several stepped forward and saluted. Rebecca returned it crisply. That was enough. 3 months later, the report landed on desks far above Camp Riverside. It was thorough, unforgiving, irrefutable. 6 bases flagged. 4 command teams removed. Policies rewritten, careers ended, others salvaged by accountability they'd never been offered before. Rebecca's name appeared only once, buried deep in the appendix, exactly where she wanted it. Officially, Lieutenant Colonel Torres had completed a special evaluation assignment. Unofficially, her actions became a warning. A year later, at a different base, a young drill instructor paused mid-inspection. He looked at a recruit struggling to keep her hands from shaking. Old habits surfaced. Then he remembered Camp Riverside. He chose differently. Rebecca stood in front of a mirror in a quiet apartment far from the noise of training grounds. Her hair had grown back, short, sharp, deliberate. She adjusted the collar of her uniform and checked her reflection. Same eyes, same calm, different world. Her phone buzzed once, a single message from an unknown number. They changed everything. Thank you. She stared at it for a moment, then deleted it, not because it didn't matter, but because she didn't do this for gratitude. She did it because power should fear accountability more than soldiers fear authority. Because strength should protect, not perform. Because somewhere, right now, a recruit was being watched, not to be broken, but to be built. Rebecca picked up her cover and stepped out the door, already moving toward the next assignment. Somewhere else, another base, another silence waiting to be shattered. They shaved her head for laughs. What they didn't realize was that they were the ones being measured, and they failed. Years later, the story still circulated, but never the way it had happened. In mess halls and barracks across the country, it was told in fragments, a warning passed down between generations of instructors. A quiet lesson slipped into late night conversations when recruits thought no one was listening. They said a woman once came through a base pretending to be weak. They said a sergeant shaved her head and lost everything. They said a general arrived so angry the walls shook. Most of them never learned her name. That was intentional. Lieutenant Colonel Rebecca Torres never corrected the rumors. In fact, she allowed them to blur, to soften, to become legend instead of biography. Legends travel farther. They don't need clearance. They don't require proof, only memory. By then, she had moved on to a different role: oversight, training ethics, quiet authority, the kind that doesn't shout. At a leadership symposium years later, a young captain approached her after a closed-door session. Nervous, earnest, new to command. "Ma'am," he said, lowering his voice, "can I ask you something off the record?" Rebecca nodded. "Is it true," he asked, "that discipline only works if fear is involved?" She studied him for a long moment. Long enough to make him uncomfortable, but not afraid. "Fear works fast," she said finally. "That's why lazy leaders use it." The captain frowned slightly. "Then what lasts?" Rebecca answered without hesitation. "Respect," she said, "and the certainty that power will be held accountable." The captain nodded slowly, absorbing it. Later that evening, alone in her office, Rebecca opened an old, sealed file. Camp Riverside. The first page still showed a timestamp, a biometric spike, a clipped note that had triggered everything. She didn't linger on it. She closed the file and locked it away. Outside her window, a new group of recruits ran drills under the setting sun. They moved awkwardly, imperfectly, but they were learning, being built, not broken. Rebecca allowed herself a rare smile, not because justice had been loud, but because it had been permanent. Somewhere, a sergeant paused before crossing a line because of a story he'd heard but never fully understood. Somewhere, a recruit stood taller because she knew silence wasn't her only option. And somewhere else, another base was being watched carefully, quietly, by someone who knew exactly how invisible strength could be. Rebecca turned off the light and walked away. The mission was never about revenge, never about humiliation. It was about making sure the next shaved head would be a choice, not a punishment.